Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is season 6, episode 33. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. Today's episode is the conclusion of my interview with Kresta, a therapist in California who was telling us all about her journey to what she considers freedom from misophonia, and went over topics relating to trauma, the internal family systems modality, and brain spotting. In part 2, we'll dive deeper into her own personal journey, expanding on what we covered in part 1, plus legacy burdens, seeing an energy healer, getting in her car and going on rage drives, and this is not the same as road rage, highly sensitive people, HSPs, more details on brain spotting, and a lot of practical tips on doing parts work as part of internal family systems. A lot of people like part 1, and I don't think this one's going to disappoint. After the show, let me know what you think. You can reach out by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. By the way, if you're enjoying this little series and the podcast in general, please leave a quick review or rating if you haven't already, wherever you listen to the podcast. It really helps us go up in the algorithms and reach more misophones. Since I'm sure you want me to roll right in to the rest of this conversation, I won't go too much into announcements. There are links to those in the show notes. For now, let's continue with my conversation with Kresta. Kresta, let's continue kind of, roughly where we left off. I think we were kind of talking about brain spotting and Misophonia Freedom Lab. Do you want to talk more about that? Because this is kind of your bread and butter here.
Yeah, we've covered a lot, right? We talked about trauma, we've talked about parts work and the nervous system and brain spotting, and we haven't really talked about misophonia. What the heck does this have to do with misophonia? So if it's okay, I think it's, I'd like to share my own story, briefly, because I really recognize that everyone's journey is going to be different. And so I don't expect my journey to be some sort of exact roadmap for healing. But I think there are themes along my healing journey that I think could be helpful for others. And then I'd love to, we haven't actually talked on the topic of legacy burdens, which is also a concept in IFS, which I think really goes a long way for us to understand this sort of question of, is misophonia an inherited condition?
Right.
So I definitely want to be able to touch on that. But so anyway, after learning about these modalities, IFS and brain spotting, I was really blown away by brain spotting particularly. So I went to a training. My first training, I actually picked misophonia as my topic to process. So you actually pick something to process while you're in training, so you experience brain spotting for yourself. And I picked misophonia and found a spot for it. And almost immediately, I just had this huge release of emotions. And there was sadness, there was anger, but the main emotion I felt coming through was the shame. And I just felt the weight of the shame I had been carrying for so long around living with misophonia. All the misunderstandings, all the cruel comments, or being dismissed or not taken seriously, or people not believing me, and all the sort of energy I had to hold in my body trying to manage the rage emotion. And all of that just came rushing out of me. I was crying, sobbing. My body was shaking. This is not uncommon for a really deep brain spotting session. And what's interesting is afterwards, I still had misophonia, but what was different was previously when I would try to advocate for myself and tell people about misophonia, I would have this very kind of my shoulders would slump, and I'd be like, well, I have this processing disorder called misophonia, and it just means that could you please not eat crackers in front of me? It was very kind of small and filled with shame. And afterwards, after processing with the brain spotting, there was the shame was gone. And so it was now I could walk up to someone. So I have this sound processing disorder. It's called misophonia. This is what it means. So basically, if you won't stop eating that carrot in front of me, I'm going to have to leave. There's just this confidence that I had the shame wasn't there anymore. And it's like, I don't really care what you think about me. This is what it is. And it was just so, that in itself was so, there was so much freedom in that. And so I was like, okay, this is good. So let's keep following this path. The next sort of step was I was doing a training that involved watching 46 hours of a woman who was doing the training talk. And she happened to have this particular mouth sound that became a trigger for me. And I really loved her training and I really wanted to get the information, but the more I listened to it, the more the trigger was bothering me. And, I'd turn down the volume, I'd take breaks or whatever. Anyway, at one point, it just got too much and I had to stop. And my therapist had said, when you find yourself triggered, take a moment and try doing some self brain spotting, which is once you know how to do it, you can do it yourself and see what comes up. And so I did that. I took a pause and I found a spot for what was coming up in me physically and emotionally. And I found this part, and this part said very distinctly, ouch, it hurts. It hurts so much. And I just sat with that part and like, I know it hurts. And I know she doesn't mean to hurt you. If she knew what she was doing, I'm sure she would try to like not make that sound anymore. She's not doing it on purpose. And I'm so sorry it hurts. And that really helped that part calm down. But when I brought that to my therapist in our next session, she says, oh, okay. Well, what part was getting hurt? I was like, oh, that's a good question. So we did more brain spotting. And what I found in the brain, when you brain spot, you can kind of go into this almost like fourth dimension. You can, sometimes it's a very physical sensation or experience or an emotional experience. But this particular brain spot was, I got a lot of visuals. Mm-hmm. And the visuals I got involved seeing almost like brain structures that were throwing up like hard to describe, but my understanding of it was, as I was looking at it, was almost like scar tissue trying to protect against the pain. And in the visual I saw this a scalpel, this sharp scalpel coming out of a stormy sky, and it was punching down into something that was in the middle of this like scar tissue. And I remember looking at it and going, okay, here's my body throwing up these reactions and it's not working. It's not protecting against this pain. And I was actually stuck there for a bit. I was like, oh, there's nothing to do. I can't stop it. But my therapist, thank goodness, was like really held the space and the hope for me. And she said, the psyche isn't stagnant. So let's see if we can find out more about this. And so I was able to eventually make my way around and find out what was in the middle of it. And what I saw was initially this big mound that was kind of sore. Like if you're poking a sore and it's never allowed to heal, right? It's just always sore because you keep poking at it. And I stayed with that for a while, and then it turned into this sort of like glowing mound and then like a humanoid kind of form that was in a fetal position. And then it unfurled and she looked best. She kind of looked not like Tinkerbell, but she was like a light fairy. So she's like glowing from within. She had wings and she was flitting around my mind space. And I kind of got the sense that she wasn't really supposed to be there. This wasn't where she's supposed to be. But she flitted around for a while and then she looked right at me and she said, your light is important. And then she flew off. I was like, okay, I don't really know what that means right now. But I did get a sense because at the time I was working in a really toxic work environment where I felt like my sort of authenticity and ability to heal was really being thwarted. And it helped me get clear on I was in the wrong place at the work I was at the time. And so that continued my journey and just this healing journey and my journey as a therapist. So that helped with that. And eventually I came to work for Pasadena Trauma Therapy, which is where I am now. It's a group practice. And it's so loving and so supportive. And I've just really blossomed there. But part of what I learned there in working with the trauma, complex trauma population was this idea of energy being trapped in the body. Like the body keeps the score. And part of my sort of self-care as a trauma therapist, because I'm exposed to a lot of this negative energy, was I actually ended up going to see an energy healer. And we talked about a couple things, but I did specifically ask about misophonia just to see what she would say. And what she said was, you need to find a way to release the rage energy. It's like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So she recommended, screaming, whatever rage. So what I do actually now is a rage drive, and I can talk more about that later. But basically, it's just whenever I feel that rage energy coming up in me, instead of stuffing it down, which is what I've done for so long, I need to find a healthy way to get it out of my system. And that really helps. And even if it's not a misophonia rage, anytime I'm feeling rage come up, my body is tensing up, and I want to, be tempted to stuff it back down again. When I can, and it's safe, my husband's at home with my son, and I get in the car and I drive around and I call my rage drives, and I just yell and I scream and I
Yeah.
curse at whatever's coming up into my brain. And I've only had to do those about 3 times, but every time I do them, it takes about 20 minutes to go through the full sort of curve of that. But at the end, I just come out of it with this clarity and this groundedness of what I'm really taking a stand for. And I'm just rock solid in what's important to me. It's really magical. And so this is definitely a piece I think everyone can take something from. Um, and I work with a lot of clients who have a lot of anger that has not been allowed to be expressed. And one client in particular did this same thing and had the same experience where they just got a lot more clarity and grounding. So there really is something to this healthy release of rage energy that's very different from venting. I've been hearing, I don't know if you would deal. I was reading something along the lines of misophonia, and someone was saying, like, don't vent about it. Like, it's venting isn't good. Have you been hearing about that at all?
No, I haven't heard that. That seems like an odd thing to.
Oh.
Well, well, the I well, the only thing I've mentioned on the podcast is like sometimes, like if you go on social media, it seems to be a lot of venting,
Mm.
but that's not real venting. That's not like going on a rage drive. um,
Right. And yeah, no,
it's not really releasing anything.
exactly. And that is the difference between like releasing energy, like the rage energy or negative energy, versus venting. Venting actually is contaminating because I'm usually venting to a person. So I'm just
Yeah.
transferring my rage or anger onto, even if they're just in the vicinity, there's that,
Hmm.
contamination factor. And a rage drive and releasing rage energy is, I'm releasing it to transform it, not to transfer it. I think
Mm.
I think that's important. I'm not looking to transfer it to someone else so someone else experiences my pain. I'm looking to release it um, to whatever. There was one rage drive in particular where someone had attacked us while we were verbally attacked us while we were looking at Christmas lights. It was a whole thing. And we're driving away. And I was like, I think I don't ever want to look at Christmas lights again. My body was shaking. I was so activated by this attack. And I realized, okay, this isn't my energy. This person, I guess, has had a really bad day or experience, and she definitely projected it onto us. I need to get this out of my system. And I went on my usual rage drive, but I ended up actually feeling really cold. There's this park nearby that has these really big native trees. And I just asked the trees to take the energy. I'm like, this isn't mine. Please take it. Please recycle it. Like, so whatever works for you, but it's releasing it and having it transform as opposed to putting it on someone else.
Is there a term for that other than well, yeah, the act of releasing energy through releasing that rage? Like I don't know, more scientific-y kind of term or therapy term.
I don't know. It is,
Okay, yeah, I'm just curious in case people
yeah,
want to Google for it or something, or ask ChatGPT or something. I'm just
yeah.
curious.
I don't think this is something that people are talking
Mm-hmm.
enough about. Maybe we can find our own sort of verbiage for it. But there is definitely, I now looking back on my experience, there is definitely a connection between this and misophonia. And I will definitely be getting to that more. But releasing the rage energy was huge for me. Um,
Yeah.
so I want to put that out there. And
Yeah, and you said so. Okay, so this also came right. So you were doing the brain spotting and the got that message from um, the fairy, I think you called it,
yeah,
um,
my love
and
fairy.
obviously, yeah, that being kind of transformative. You then saw somebody, right, the energy healer who told you to release the energy. Then I guess I'm sure you'll get to this, but was this starting to affect your misophonia at all? Then,
Yeah, let's see. So, it was interesting because at this point it was turning into a deeper journey than just
uh-huh.
misophonia. Like finding the light fairy really helped me like reflect on my own sort of inner light and my purpose and where I was meant to be, what I was feeling called to, and my journey to become a therapist is very much aligned with that. And finding IFS, just things were just clicking into place.
Hmm.
Um, and so while misophonia, and this is what's interesting about misophonia, that, and I think that IFS has this term called trailheads. So whatever we come to therapy with, as we identify, okay, this is the thing I want to work on, it's a trailhead to what is underneath. And so I really, and this is being confirmed now by several other therapists who are working with misophones in the IFS concepts, which is you focus on, pick misophonia, and then what you find are the parts affected by it. So I have yet to have someone find misophonia. It's like misophonia isn't a part.
Yeah.
But when we target it, we find the parts of us that are affected by it. So when I targeted misophonia with my brain spotting, I found the parts of me that were carrying shame, and the negative emotions and effects that came from that and holding on to that. Um, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, this is also very much in line with my thinking, where misophonia isn't. There's something deeper. It just doesn't. It doesn't end with like misophonia as a symptom, and that's kind of
Yeah.
the root cause in itself. There's the fact that it's led you to kind of a deeper understanding of yourself. I think it leads to put the real healing, which is
Yes.
I think we'll get to. But yeah, I don't want people listening and thinking, oh, she's talking about brain spawning and fairies and stuff, and it's not related. It is definitely I definitely feel like this is all related, because you're getting to a deeper thing, which is resulting in that, which had resulted in the symptom of misophonia.
Yes, yes. And I think that's where, we have this sort of fix it mentality, not just about
Mm-hmm.
misophonia, but about a lot of other things. And, and I'm 23 years sober. So this is part of the history of treating alcoholism. Let's find the solution. Let's find the magic pill. Let's find the gene that says, this is why you're an alcoholic. And there still hasn't been a magic pill. I'm glad there isn't a magic pill. Um, Alcoholism and even eating disorders, which I have experience with both, they both share that they're very complex,
Mm-hmm.
and that there is no magic pill for them. But it's not so much how do we fix it, but what can we learn from it? I think that's the question
Yes.
we're not really asking enough. It goes much
Well,
deeper.
in private insurance doesn't want you to ask those questions. It just wants to give you
Uh
something
huh.
to take, whether it's a therapist for a set number of sessions, then get out, or a
Yeah.
pill. So,
Yeah. And I know there's always a place for solutions. Like solution focused therapy is a therapy that for certain things is very helpful, but it's the learn to live with it mentality versus what can we learn from it, what deeper healing might be needed. Again, I think misophonia in my experience is a trailhead, and I'll be sharing more about that later, because sort of the next step in this journey for me was,
hmm.
you know, and this whole journey took me over 2 years, and there was even periods where I'd kind of lost faith, and I'm never going to
Hmm.
find a solution. I just to live with this. And I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I lost faith, and my therapist brought it up. She's like, "We haven't talked about your misophonia in a while." I'm like, "I know. I'm just kind of discouraged." But we did start exploring it a bit more, and we both kind of had the same realization. We were in session. We both had kind of the realization at the same time. She's like, we keep talking about the parts of you that are affected by the misophonia, but we're not talking about it. Like, what is it? Meaning the misophonia. What is
Mm-hmm.
it? I was like, you're right, we're not. And so because I had done so much brain spotting work, I just felt into that. What is it? And it was very elusive. It didn't want to be seen, but I did find it. And I won't go into great detail about what I saw, because I think personally my visuals are mine, and I think other people are going to have different experiences, whether that be visuals or whatever, that they're metaphorical or imaginative, however you want to conceive that. But I did find it, and it was feeding off my negative energy. It was feeding off the negative energy that the misophonia was creating. And what I learned from that was, firstly, there is a way to release these things. And so I was eventually able to do that. But what came of it afterwards was, so it took a while to finding it and then trying to get curious about it. Like, why are you here? What is your purpose? I honestly didn't get a whole lot of answers from it. It's more what I'm learning afterwards that I think is so significant. And I think we actually can learn more from the sort of after story. But when it was gone, when I kind of released it, whatever it is, the first thing that happened was I was really emotional. There's about 3 days where I was just very emotional. And I checked inside with my parts. I was like, okay, I'm feeling your emotions. What's going on? And my parts were like, is it really over? Because that was horrible. Like, that was torture.
Like living with that, not just not
Yeah.
finding it, but living with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Once it was gone. And it reminded me of my, sexual abuse clients who it's hard to acknowledge how awful something is until you're actually out of it. Like, you're away from it. Okay, this is really over. Now I can finally admit how horrible it was. That's what it felt like. And I really felt my parts, just there was this mourning, and like, that was torture. It was just, the emotion behind it. And so I just took a lot of time to take care of them and to see what they needed. And it just, I was like, yeah, that was horrible. And I really think that the pain and the torture of misophonia gets I don't think it's fully acknowledged. I've often said that I would never wish misophonia on my worst enemy, and I still believe that. I wouldn't wish misophonia on anyone.
Yeah, remember, society thinks misophonia is just an idiosyncrasy or a personality trait that we're just a little bit more, I don't know, fussy about sounds, and so that's something that's going to take a while to change. But yeah, you and I and everyone listening, I think, agrees with that.
Yeah, and I think because it's a hard experience to explain, and a lot of us say, well, I'm just really uncomfortable. And I've had a lot of other therapists ask me, well, what's the difference between OCD and misophonia? And I recently learned about OCD a little more in depth, because I don't specialize in OCD. But the therapist I talked to who specializes in OCD she defines it as a doubt disorder. So OCD is like, there's intrusive thoughts and such, but the uncomfortable feeling in OCD is more of around doubt. And I reflected, I was like, oh, that's different, because misophonia, it's actual pain. It's not just an emotional discomfort, it is actual physical pain, which is why expecting someone to just sit through it.
Right.
I hear stories and my parts get really, they're like, what the heck are they doing? It's so upsetting. So I really want to validate people's experience. This is a physical pain. We may not have the words to describe it, but it is physically painful. So now I recognized, so once that was gone, my parts were grieving and healing and, coming to terms. And checking it. And it was about 2 weeks. And I realized that my body was still holding the memory of tensing up when I heard sounds. So I eased myself into it. I didn't like test this theory that, okay, I got rid of this, whatever it was. Now I must not have misophonia anymore, right? Eureka, I found this. This is
Right.
the answer. I got the sense that I really needed to ease myself into it. And that was true, because I would, like, my husband would make a noise that previously would trigger me, and I had to like hear it. I didn't feel the sting anymore, but my body was still tensing up, and I had to just kind of tune into my body and go like, it's okay. It doesn't hurt anymore. You can relax. And that took a while for my body to release that and to trust that that sting of the misophonia wasn't going to hit me anymore. It was a few weeks after that, I was actually at Costco, and I heard a trigger noise that usually would have meant I'd be running in the other direction. And I heard it, I looked over at it, and I was like, huh, yeah, that noise used to make me run for the hills, and I can be with it now.
Right.
It's still a little annoying, but the sting wasn't there. And I was like, okay, this is real. So cut to a few weeks after that, I was like, okay, this is, maybe I have found the answer. I don't know. Is this permanent? I had no, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Kind of like testing the waters. Is this too good to be true? And also, like, how do I even share this with people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tune in
I'm
and
sure
you'll
your
find a
mind's like,
library in your head,
yeah. Right.
So that's what I mean by, I haven't found the magic pill, but I hope that my journey can help like create a roadmap for others to explore their own inner experience. But so cut to a few weeks after that, and I went and got a massage, a deep tissue massage. So it was about 2 hours long. They used salt stone and CBD oil and all that, sort of good stuff. And I came home and I was taking a shower. It was about an hour afterwards, and I suddenly had all this nausea come up in my stomach. I was like, whoa, it's okay. This is energy coming up for me. And I was like, okay, this needs to come up and out. So I let it out. And what came up from my stomach, up through my chest, out my mouth was just, oh my gosh, it's such a mix. There was anger, there was grief, there was sadness, there was emoting and yelling, and sometimes it was like moans of sadness or angry yells and screaming, and it was just and that went on for about 10 minutes.
Wow.
And it was just this energy just coming up, and it was like an energy vomit. So
Very different than I was going to ask if it was literally a vomit, but this is different than the rage drives, like another level, or similar?
Yes,
Okay.
So the rage drives helped me release the rage energy that was coming up in the current moment.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of stuffing it down, I was trying to find a healthy way to release it, to get clarity, which the rage drives helped me do. But this energy had history to it. Like I could feel it was deep inside of me and coming up and out. And again, it was this realization like, oh my gosh, this is like everything I've been stuffing down for years around I got the sense it was definitely misophonia related. And there was just this sense of lightness afterwards. I was a little shaky. I mean, it could very well have been a physical vomit. That's actually not unheard of in the work I do. That can happen. But this was definitely an emotional vomit. But there was I felt even lighter after that. But what it really highlighted for me was how much trapped energy we store and hold on to. And it really made me sympathetic for anyone suffering with misophonia who is trying to control that rage energy as it comes up.
Yeah.
What do we do with it? We can't express it in the moment. We don't really feel like we have anyone to talk to about it. Like, what do we do with it? We stuff it down. And it's so intense, and rage energy in particular is just so toxic and destructive. And so that's what I learned from that experience, for sure.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Quite a journey here.
Mhm.
And then is okay. And then after that, was there? I guess. Yeah. What happened after that? Was there another period of just kind of like processing that and just kind of being in a, I don't know, more sensitive state, or was that kind of a light switch to kind of not really not? Did you realize at that point that it was kind of permanent? Maybe this the losing of the misophonia.
Um, I I went back to that energy healer and
Mm-hmm.
I told her my story about what I found and
This is
how
the one
I
who originally told you to do the rage drives and whatnot.
yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And I told her about what happened and how I released it, and she basically said, "Good job. I'm glad you were able to do that yourself."
Yeah, because she didn't tell you about going to the. Well, did she warn you that go to the massage and this will happen, or
Nope,
was it
nope,
just yeah, 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 okay?
nope. Yeah, she had just that was I think in her wisdom, she just this is what she needs to do next,
She put
that
you on a path, and you kind of
uh-huh.
were able to
Yeah.
find it.
Yep, yep. Um and I asked her, I was like, is this gonna could this come back? And she said, well, yeah, it could. So, keep doing what you're doing. And if you happen to notice something, you should basically, call me back and we'll figure out what's going on.
Send
Maybe
me a
we can figure out
text.
what's going on. Yeah. Send
Yeah.
a text. Um, but so actually, recently, this happened recently. So what I've been trying to pay attention to more and um, is when I feel something in my body that feels familiar. Um,
Mm,
so recently, like again, the sting is gone, which is such a freedom in itself. I love it. Um, and I still notice the sounds. Like, let's face it, a lot of these sounds that we have triggers around, they are annoying.
hmm.
They're
Yeah.
just like, they are annoying. I want to validate that. And now I have this freedom to like, honey, you're making a really annoying sound. Can you knock it off, please?
You don't have the fight or flight where it turns into Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing, though. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
huge.
Where previously I couldn't say anything because I would be yelling at him because
Hmm.
the energy coming up in me would be so overpowering and wrong. He would just get defensive. But now I can say it from a very calm place of like, dude, that's annoying. Knock it off.
And do you feel like when you're not just calm, but you have, going back to something you said earlier, do you have the confidence to say it and not feel ashamed to say it? It sounds like, right? Which
Yeah.
is what a lot of people, why a lot of people, might bottle it up and not say anything, is because we feel like we know it's gonna cause that defensiveness because we think it's gonna come out in a bad way. But if you've kind of like worked through it, you probably, if you're not gonna say it in a calm way, you can probably say it more confidently. Was that also part of your new way of communicating it to your husband?
Yes. Yes. And this kind of goes back to, I think, so I'm really passionate about boundary work. I always have been. And I would always tell people when we talk about boundaries, if you think of like the Target logo, with the red circle
Yeah.
and then the white line and the dot in the middle. So if you're going to set a boundary, the outside biggest circle is when you're in a good mood, you're in a good place, your nervous system
Mm,
is calm, we're in our window of tolerance. You get into the white circle is when you're starting to feel activated or annoyed by what, might be bothering you that you want to set a boundary around. But the middle dot is when you're like, ah,
right.
stop doing that. And I always would tell people you have to set your boundary when you're in the outer circle, when you're in a good place, when the person you're talking to is in a good place. Because if you try to set it, even if you're on the white circle, people are going to pick up on the energy behind it and they may not respond positively, right?
Hmm.
Or they might respond, but with some resentment, right?
Hmm.
So what's so interesting about the misophonia response is it almost robs us of our ability to set healthy boundaries because we immediately jump to the center dot. We're
Hmm.
when we're in rage, we're like out of our window of tolerance and we're not effective communicators. People get defensive when they get faced with that energy. It doesn't work. Um, and furthermore, what's interesting, and I actually learned this from a client of mine. I have a group for sexual abuse survivors, and we were wrapping up our group, and the topics we'd been talking about were pretty activating. And so we did a little group brain spotting where we focused on grounded, neutral, or calm. And so finding a part in your body that feels grounded, neutral, or calm, and then feeling into that, and then finding a spot where you feel most closely, like feel that most closely. And you stay on that spot, and it can be a very grounding experience. And everyone was reporting, fine, okay, I found it. And yes, I'm feeling better now. But one client in particular piped up. She's like, I thought I found calm, but actually what I'm noticing now is shame. And so we got to process that. And this can happen a lot where we confuse our emotions. So I might be thinking I'm feeling calm, but actually what I'm feeling is shame. I had another client who said, I'm feeling numb, but I thought this was what peaceful felt like. So can conflate these emotions. And I was driving home after that session. I was thinking about it. I'm like, oh, that's why I had so much shame around misophonia. It was
You thought it
helping
was something
control
else.
my rage.
Oh, okay.
It was helping me control my rage, because to control I can't express my rage. So what do? I take on shame, because it's like the counterpoint to the rage.
How is so? I noticed in a lot of these kinds of therapies, you're asked to kind of find the part of your body that holds something. How do you have any tips on how to do that? Because I've tried that for various modalities. That's actually part of my homework for my current therapist. But I'm sure a lot of other people are interested in it. It's not just about me. But do you have any tips for how to sit and look for these the parts of your body that kind of that are holding these feelings?
Yes. So I think actually Sarah mentioned this, but the body scan exercise, I think, is a great way to start. And that's simply starting at the top of your head and just slowly scanning down your body and looking for where there's tension. So, and you can do a whole body scan, and you don't have to go really deep with it, especially if you're working, on your own, but you can take what you find, and at least that practice, and take it to your therapy to explore more. But yeah, so it's just a gentle body scan. You scan down your body, you just notice where the tension is.
Yeah.
And I'll often use that with my clients who come into session. They're like, I don't really know what I should work on today. And I'm like, okay, well, let's take a minute. Let's do a gentle body scan and just see where there's the most tension. And so they'll locate wherever in their body the most tension is, and let's see what's there. Can we get curious about that tension? And that's when they generally connect to a part, and then that part shares what they're struggling with. So,
and that tension kind of feels like a tightness, or is it like physical pain usually? Just
yeah, it can
curious,
either,
kind of what people might want to just try to help people kind of recognize these things.
yeah, and I think there's almost like a spectrum of that. So it's very common to feel tension, and that can have a range of intensity. Like, oh my gosh, I'm noticing a little bit of tension here. Or it could be like, oh man, my shoulders are just completely in knots.
Yeah.
It can go to actual physical pain. And then it can even go, when it's really bad, actually, is when it's numb. So whenever a client says to me, like, wow, this part of my body, I just can't even feel it. It's just completely numb.
Wow. Okay.
That's when I like, oh, can we go to that and get curious about that? Because that to me is like, yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah. And I think from my understanding, like, it's okay to, like, maybe you kind of misrecognize something, and maybe and then maybe there's another part that you can kind of get to. Like, you don't have to nail it the first time. It sounds like,
No,
because you might
yeah.
not. Okay.
Well, yeah, and the other thing to know about both, I mean, really any therapy, but specifically IFS and brain spotting, we might target, let's say, something like misophonia, and we'll find a part that's affected by it. But then we'll also, when we try to go to like the deeper trauma or the deeper hurt, we'll find what's in the way. So in IFS, we call those protectors or managers, and they'll have reasons for why they're like, nope, you can't go to that. Okay, well, I hear you. Well, why don't you want us to go to that pain? Well, she can't handle it. You won't be able to handle what you find there. Or she'll fall apart. You can't let her go there. And so we work with those protectors. We let them know they're the boss. And, if they give us a chance, we can do the healing. Like, can you? I don't know if I trust you yet. There's this whole befriending process that happens with protectors. But also with brain spotting, we may target something, and we call it following the tail of the comet. We may target something, and the client will just go in a completely different direction, but we just trust it. Like, okay, there's a reason it's coming up. Trust it. Your brain knows what it needs. Follow that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, so I guess maybe maybe I'm talking a little bit about Misophonia, Misophonia Freedom Lab. So the journey that you took, is that the kind of journey that you are taking your clients through, or is it a more abbreviated version or a longer version? I'm just kind of curious how you've put this into practice for other people.
Yeah. So, well, this is where you come in, Adil, because it was actually finding your podcast on misophonia and listening to stories that really helped me put all the puzzle pieces together. Because previously, I considered misophonia as like my side hustle, right? It's like my subspecialty. And I, work as part of a group practice for trauma. But after listening to some of the stories that you've recorded and posted, all the puzzle pieces started to fit together around the connection between trauma and what I know from working with trauma and misophonia. And so what I've started to do is reach out to other professionals who work with mind-body modalities, and talking about my experience. Like, this is what I noticed with my journey. And I want to see, like, has this come up with your clients? Have you explored this? And so I'm now in this conversation with several other professionals who work in similar ways. And there's themes that are starting to come up. So one of the directions I'm encouraging my colleagues to explore is, okay, so if your client, I have one colleague in particular has a client she's been working with her trauma for years, and she was actually ready to let her go. And then misophonia suddenly come up. Oh, and by the way, I have misophonia. And my colleague was like, I've been working with this person for years. She's never mentioned it. And so I consulted with her and I said, okay, well, who was her main trigger person? And she said, well, her mom, who's passed now, but her mom was her major trigger figure or person. I said, have you explored any unexpressed anger that she may be holding on to towards her mom? And she said, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And because my colleague had worked with this client, she knew more of her history. I didn't know the details, but knew this person's history. It made sense to her. It's like, and we haven't really explored that yet. So thank you. That helps. I'm going to work with that. She did get back to me recently and said that there's a lot coming up on just that topic. So I am following these themes of the two, and this is the thing, it's almost like the answer is hiding in plain sight. The two main emotions that come up around misophonia are rage and disgust. And if you think about, I actually just published an article on my website about this, like more about rage and disgust, is they're both boundary setting emotions. Anger and rage, anger specifically lets us know when our boundaries are being violated and that we need to do something about it. Rage is is the extreme version of that, and it can become toxic if it gets to that level, or destructive when it gets to that level. But disgust does the same thing. Disgust specifically keeps us from eating something poisonous. So it keeps us from being poisoned. And that could be either physically, like eating something poisonous or contaminated, but it can also keep us away from toxic thought. So from a group that may have a belief system that is harmful or toxic, right? So we can also feel disgust towards people's sort of mental state. And so I'm really encouraging people working with misophones to sort of explore these two areas in particular. And I'm getting some good feedback.
That's great. Yeah. So yeah, interesting. So yeah, you're kind of working with colleagues and yeah, getting feedback, whether it's through your own clients or other people's clients. Like in the case of that person who's got issues with their mom and are kind of, we'll probably put a program together and
Mhm.
test it out some more. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's really interesting. I would love to. Well, I think we will be keeping in touch and uh,
Yeah.
and learning more. That's great. I mean, that's great that it's the podcast and more importantly the guests on the podcast have kind of helped you shape your thinking and your path forward. Um,
Yeah.
because it seems like you're definitely onto something here. I mean, you are. You've obviously helped yourself and yeah, I mean, a lot of the things you're talking about, I've, as we've been talking to other folks about as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Um, and I guess, yeah, so. Any, yeah, I guess. How about do you feel like oh, right, so I was going to follow on my last question with like you've done a bunch of modalities. Do you have a sense for are there one or two that you would end up focusing on that it looks like that you'd focus on more to try to treat people, or do you feel like it take a combination of everything that you've kind of experienced yourself, or is it going to be very individualized? Like some people respond more and maybe only to things like brain spotting versus other modalities.
So I think this is really hopeful because
Hmm.
it's really whatever works for someone. Some people really resonate with something like somatic experiencing, which is more about
Hmm.
the felt body. Um, and IFS is very flexible in that way. There's somatic experiencing with IFS. There's brain spotting with parts. There's a lot of crossover, and I think a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
that we can take from each modality, specifically the brain body modalities. I think EMDR. So my colleague who is working with that um, client is also trained in EMDR. So I'm hoping I start to get some feedback about how EMDR can help process some of this stuff. Um, I'm really feeling into the importance of, you know, if we're looking at this idea of misophonia, is what can we learn from it? The takeaways are for me that, you know, and this is the piece you helped with, like everyone reporting that are highly sensitive people, right? There's this
right.
line of being highly sensitive people. And I thought about my own experience in the hypervigilance in my household, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I was really so my stepdad was a really big guy, and when he walked through the house, the whole house shook. And I can
Mm-hmm.
remember being able to tell what kind of mood he was in based on his footsteps. Um, And so what it made me reflect on is that as highly sensitive people, we're like emotional sponges, we're energy sponges. We take on other people's energy. And I think when we're little and highly sensitive, we it's a totally automatic thing that we do. Um, and so if we're around people who have a lot of negative energy, we'll take that on. We
Right,
might even feel responsible for alleviating some of that, right?
right,
And if we don't have good boundaries or know how to protect ourselves, we're just going to become these emotional sponges. And I really think that that is the piece here around highly sensitive people and misophonia, but kind of stepping into the idea of legacy burden, which I think
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah, please, yeah,
really important. So a legacy burden is burdens that we inherit through our caregivers, through our culture, or through our environment. So it's not, so we can inherit burdens that isn't something that we necessarily experience, but because our family of origin experienced it, it gets passed down through the generations. So this speaks to that transgenerational, trauma piece, the epigenetics that we're seeing in the gene work. This is that phenomenon. And, you know, I'm starting to really see how framing it in this way for parents of someone with misophonia is important. Because while you may not have caused misophonia, I do believe that misophonia is the result of a collection of negative energy. I think that's how at least I'm conceptualizing it now. How you respond is either going to make it worse or make it better. And there is a inherited piece that every parent has taken on. We all walk in the shadows of our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we like it or not, we all walk in their shadows. And some of those shadows loom larger and longer than others. And if we're not looking to the past to examine those, to heal those, we will cast those same shadows on future generations. And so while parents may not have caused the misophonia, we all have work to do to stop the cycle of transgenerational trauma. And if you think of it at an energetic level, none of my trauma clients have reported, whenever I asked about their parents and their parents' background, there's always a trauma history behind it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's never a trauma survivor who's like, oh yeah, I had a wonderful, loving family. It was just wonderful. No, there's always something. There's always something to be healed. And it's worth it. My son, who's 5, I already can tell is very sensitive. But both my husband and I are very sensitive
Yeah.
people. And my son absolutely has that. And so I'm feeling very protective about his nervous system, what he's
Mm-hmm.
absorbing. And I just think, there's actually, I just watched a workshop that Frank Anderson, who's a high level IFS trainer, he has a workshop on parenting. And he
Mm-hmm.
talks about the dynamics of parts of parents, what part of us is parenting in any given moment. Are we parenting from a part, or are we parenting from self energy? And I work with all my clients who are parents to get them in self energy. Okay. You're really upset about your son or daughter doing A, B, and C. What part of you is upset about that? And then we explore the part, and then we say, okay, let's get you into self energy. What does self energy have to say about this? So I think that parts have, IFS and parts work has a lot to offer parents as well, in helping and learning from this phenomenon of misophonia.
Yeah, absolutely. But Kresta, I'll play devil's advocate. Aren't you, being an American, aren't you supposed to toughen up your child, but and not protect them from everything?
So
You don't have to answer that as a rhetorical
yeah,
question. But anyway.
no, that is a good question. So it's interesting to say as an American. So what legacy burden as an American are you noticing in that comment?
Right, right. Well,
You
yeah,
know,
there are many.
and here's
Dropping bombs on country, dropping nuclear bombs on countries, or slavery. There's many, many
yeah.
things.
Well, and that's why I love IFS is it gives us a concept, a way to, I think, make the world a better place, because it's
Hmm.
based on systems theory. So you can scale that up. It's not just personal system, it is the family system. It is
Right.
a town system. It's a country system. It was actually really interesting when the war in Ukraine broke out. There were 3 therapists, IFS therapists. One was from Russia, one was from Poland, and one was from the Ukraine. And they all got together and discussed their own country's legacy
Mm.
burdens and how they were affecting not only their countrymen, but also their interactions with the other countries. And it was really interesting to explore. And, America has their own legacy burdens. Individualism is one of them. And I think you identify like, oh,
Oh,
we're
right, right,
toughen up our kid. That's individualism, right? You got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
right, right.
Um, yeah.
Well, yeah, interesting. Yeah, we're coming up again
Mm-hmm.
to the to another hour here. I'm as we can keep going, I'm sure, but yeah, we should probably wind down. You want to talk about legacy burdens. Is there anything else you want to kind of share now? I'm sure we'll be in touch, and I'd love to have you on again. But yeah, anything else you want to share now with the audience?
Yeah, so as of this recording, I am currently pulling together, I'm going to be doing a workshop on misophonia, and I am targeting specifically the mind body therapist community. So, my IFS community, my brain spotting community, I'm like calling in the troops. to educate more mind-body therapists on what misophonia is and is not, and to present some of my ideas around what's worth exploring and why. So I'm really hoping to get more therapists aware of misophonia. And then after that, I'm hoping to start a consultation group for same therapists who want to consult about, what they're finding with their clients, what themes are coming up, and really just start focusing on the wins. Where are we getting wins? Where are we noticing growth? And just start really focusing on that, and similarities versus differences, and just really start moving towards a more holistic picture of healing that I think misophonia really has to offer us.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. I love that that deals with. I love that you're sharing your knowledge or wanting to share your knowledge with other therapists, because a lot of these ideas you definitely need to get out into the world. I think this is going to help a lot of people, and thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing all these ideas here. I think they're probably new to a lot of people, but I think definitely definitely in the right direction, and more people should be listening to this and trying these modalities, because it's not going to be solved purely with we're not going to wait for a pill or it's not going to be a traditional kind of therapy. So
I don't think we really want a pill. I think
no,
we already dispense way too many
these
pills.
and I think like you said, misophonia is part of something that's trying to teach us something. It's trying to tell us something that's happening deeper, and so it could affect more deeper change. So
I was gonna share, like, if people want to learn more about IFS and parts work, the IFS Institute has a lot of videos on their websites, and if you're a professional, there's a lot of information on trainings and pre-recorded trainings. There's also a book that I really like that I think is appropriate for teens and tweens. It's called We All Have Parts. It's by Colleen Atwood, available on Amazon. I think it's a really great introduction to the concepts of IFS. Well worth it. And there's also the workshop that I did, which might be more geared toward therapists, but I'm going to be encouraging almost all my parent clients to watch this when they're worried about kids. But Frank Anderson has a workshop available on Life Architect on parts and parenting. And both my husband and I have watched it, and it's really helped with our framework for how to parent our son and how to parent together as a team. It's just been really amazing. So I encourage everyone to check those out.
I definitely need to check those out. Amazing. Well, Kresta, thank you again for coming on. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for having me, and thank you so much, Adil, for this magical healing space you've created. It's amazing.
Oh, it's mutual. I mean, this is helping me. So, Thank you, Kresta. Again, a fascinating conversation that goes far beyond healing misophonia, and looking forward to chatting in the future. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website, misophoniapodcast.com. It's usually easiest just to send me a quick message on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast. You can follow there, or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast, and on Twitter, it's actually Misophonia Show. Support the show financially by visiting Patreon at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. Theme music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.